Hi there. My name is AJ. I am the founder of Studio Clinic Portland, and I am an acupuncturist. I am an energy healer, and I'm the creator of Linguistic Energy Medicine. You might be wondering what Linguistic Energy Medicine is, perhaps why you should even care, and I'm here to answer that question for you. And I'm going to go through a few other questions too that I've heard over time that I hope can give you a well-rounded understanding of this unique healing modality that I've been developing over the past several years now. So linguistic energy medicine, it is an energy healing modality. It can be practiced in person or at a distance over the telephone. It started out more in person as essentially an extension to my acupuncture practice. It was really something that I was using behind the scenes for myself to help guide the way that I applied Chinese medicine in treatment sessions. Lately, it's really taken on more of a life of its own, and I'm practicing it and expanding it much more into distance healing and sessions over the telephone with patients. And from the standpoint of a single session of it, it's really just there to give patients a lift, to elevate their vibrational state. This is not so different, as an analogy, from polishing silver. In that tarnished state, it's there to make you shine. And everyone has experienced the difference between those two energy qualities. In that tarnished state, you probably feel dull at best, uninspired, or you maybe even feel horrible. You might be really sick. You might be struggling with emotional conditions or have some sort of a chronic illness, for example. In that shining state, in contrast, these are the moments in which you felt on top of the world. You felt great. You were inspired. You were ready to charge out there, excited about life. Maybe you've experienced times where you were in a job interview or a business meeting where you couldn't say the wrong thing. Or perhaps you were playing some sporting event and you were just scoring left and right. You couldn't miss. Maybe you've been gambling at some point and the cards are just coming to you without you thinking. These are all examples of those shining states of energy that you can manifest. So that's the point from a single session standpoint, is just to generate that shining state for a patient. Now, over the longer term, when you raise your vibration on a repeated basis, there are a lot more positive benefits that can start to take place in a person's life. An individual can become much more satisfied, much more content. It's a lot easier to appreciate life, appreciate the things around you, appreciate yourself. You're generally going to increase the amount of connection you feel with your higher mind or your inner being, or if you want to think of it as just your subconscious or unconscious minds, the totality of yourself. And as you increase that resonance and connection with the totality of yourself, it's easier to tap into what your real passions in life are, what your ikigai is, as the Japanese refer to it, that reason to be, the reason that you get up in the morning. And I don't mean when I say that it's your alarm clock or the job that you have to go to, but more that overarching purpose in life for you, what you're here to explore as a human being. And as you increase that level of connection with yourself, that ends up getting reflected in the ability that you have to connect with people outside of you as well, whether that's complete strangers that you come across here and there or people that you have close, intimate relationships with. That's not to say that you will never encounter differences or diversity among people, differences of opinion and so forth, but the manner in which you interact with them changes. It's easier for you to experience frictions like water off the duck's back, as they say. You could perhaps more easily understand how these diversities and differences are benefiting you rather than experiencing them in a negative context. And overall, this is just moving in the direction of increasing your overall level of health and well-being. And this taps into what for me is the real foundational intent of linguistic energy medicine, and that is to slow the physical aging process of the human body and to increase lifespans and longevity for individuals. It's really designed to create long, healthy, happy lives for people. That's been the goal of this modality for me from the beginning. It's something that's near and dear to my heart, and consequently, I naturally over time drew myself to different pieces that could play into that and generate this energy modality. Now, if you are approaching linguistic energy medicine from the state of illness, where perhaps you have, whether it's an acute condition or a long-term chronic condition that you've been struggling with, it is possible, because of the different framework that linguistic energy medicine is approaching health and disease, to begin to discover and find out how to unwind and dissolve the blocks that have been standing in your way from you achieving the health that you're seeking. I've seen some people who had been dealing with chronic conditions for long enough that when they got to me, they'd essentially given up hope that they would ever achieve real long-term health in their life. And they were able to unwind, to find out what were the associated issues in their life that were the real undercurrents of this illness. And instead of just fighting with disease, they could turn their attention and address the real underlying communications that were associated with that disease. And oftentimes this ends up being really a growth and development process for the person, in addition to just healing a particular condition. So that's a little bit of the basis of linguistic energy medicine, kind of the features and benefits, if you will, of it. I'm going to go now through a handful of questions here to try to fill in the gaps of how this can be possible. So this first question is, what do you mean by energy medicine? And energy medicine in general is just any modality of healing that is intent upon affecting the energy field of a body. And that's different from essentially trying to affect the physical body directly. And when I say energy field, that can be energy moving through and within the body or surrounding the environment of the body. And this is not to say that an energy healing modality won't use the physical form or perhaps emotional, mental, spiritual aspects of a person as part of the methodology to treat. It's really the intention that you're moving towards, to affect the energy field first and let the energy field act as really the real instrument of healing, in contrast to what you see in most modern medicine, in which we're applying the medicine directly to the body to affect the body. And this is because in the West, we do have a tendency to be much more physically focused. We're more likely to see the energy field of the body as, if anything, a byproduct of what's happening physically. For example, the stuff that we tap into with EEGs and EKGs to measure the electrical qualities of the body. We do use them in medicine diagnostically, but yeah, we see them as not the thing that's affecting the body, but really what's being affected by the body. An energy practitioner, and also a lot of more Eastern philosophies of medicine in general, have an idea that it's kind of flipped the other way around, that the energy field acts as more of the overarching instructor to the body. It's communicating to the body how to develop, how to deal with external stimuli, and so forth. So that the real distinction is an energy medicine is just attempting to affect the energy field first, as opposed to something purely physical. And the next question is, what is the linguistic part about? The linguistic part of linguistic energy medicine. And at a base level, language is something that when we first hear it, we think of spoken language, right? Or written language, what can be referred to as natural languages, English, Spanish, so forth. And this is a big part of language, but language in general can be thought of as any symbolic representation that we used for underlying information. And we can use languages in communication. Now, we're constantly surrounded by languages. As an example, you may see on street signs symbols that communicate information to you. You may come across company logos that are essentially linguistic expressions. If you see the Nike swoosh, you understand that it's associated with a shoe company and that it's involved with athletics. And there may be other associations that you've attached to that symbol as well. Perhaps Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods, Andre Agassi. These types of things are all communicated in that small symbol. That's an example of a language. Computer programming languages are obviously languages that we've used and defined to allow us to communicate and instruct machines that we use in modern technology. Mathematics itself is actually a language, even though oftentimes the people who use it most, they don't really acknowledge that it is. It's an interesting phenomenon that I see a lot of physicists or mathematicians thinking that the mathematics itself is the information, but it's actually not. It's just a symbolic expression to represent information. Artistic expressions can be thought of in a linguistic context. Whether it's painting or music or film and television, that's a very rich medium of symbolism that can communicate all kinds of moods, storylines, even in the case of advertising, subliminal messaging and so forth in some ways to convince you and provide motivations for you to buy a certain product. So this is all taking place in forms of language and symbolism and communication. The body itself has several different methods of communicating through language. There's spoken language, of course, but you also hear that term body language, which is inclusive of your posture, the way you're moving, your facial expressions. Oftentimes it's considered that actually the majority of communication that you experience in a conversation with someone is taking place through these other linguistic expressions, these body languages, as opposed to just the pure spoken form. And you can think of even in the pure spoken form, there's intonations and sounds and a lot of subtleties beyond just the pure written form, so to speak, of a language that are communicating a lot of information to you. Now, the reason that linguistic is in the title of the modality and why it's associated closely with energy, linguistic energy medicine, is because it's based on this discovery, essentially, if you want to call it that, or realization that energy itself is actually a language as well. And I would argue that it's in truth the mother of all languages, of all these languages that I was just talking about. I believe that it's truly the base method of communication for all organic life on this planet, including our bodies. And I think a lot of those sort of hits that a person gets, where you're really getting a feel for a person when you have an interaction with them, is actually being conveyed to you through energy. Now, we don't necessarily always acknowledge or recognize that that's what's taking place. And the reason is because the language of energy is communicating at a level that's not as obvious to our rational mind. Linguistic energy medicine is designed to translate this linguistic energy into a different language, into a language of symbolism that makes more sense to our rational mind. And the reason for that is twofold. One, because speaking with the body in its native language is very releasing and dissipating. It's very healing to the body in and of itself. And the second reason is that when we translate that into a form that we can then talk about and share and think about at a rational level with our intellectual minds, it gives us an easier time processing and folding that information into our life and addressing or responding to the communications that are being conveyed by the body. So that's the reason that linguistic is in the name of the medicine, is just because it is so heavily focused on language, and in particular, energy as a language. All right. So the next question is, how did you develop this modality? And the way that I developed it, as I've kind of been alluding to thus far, is there's two sides to it. One of them has to do with energy. And I started really dabbling into some energy cultivation practices, things like Tai Chi and Qigong, probably about 14 years ago now. And I also started practicing body work. I began studying massage and became a massage therapist. And I was drawn a lot to shiatsu massage, which this is a physical modality. It's used to treat the physical body for sure, but it's based on the Chinese acupuncture meridian system. So it was starting to lean in that direction of seeing the body's energy anatomy and working from there. And within this bodywork massage context, I also started dabbling in some pure energy modalities. And in particular, I studied and practiced polarity therapy. And this is a little bit more of a modern modality. I want to say it was developed in the 50s approximately. And part of the reason that I liked it was that it resonated really well with acupuncture meridian therapy. Eventually, I went from there into just practicing acupuncture. I became an acupuncturist and developed this whole energy side of my understanding. Then on the other side, there was something that is related, but I think it's a little different. It has more to do with what I would consider mindfulness or mind-based practices. And I actually think of them as forms of trance consciousness or dream consciousness. There's sort of these moving into more alpha brainwave states of being. And these came about originally, I became very interested in lucid dreaming and did a lot of exploration in that direction. And then I was very interested in trying to create these dream states in waking life. And that involved hypnosis things, deep meditation and so forth, and some stream of consciousness channeling type of things. I would do like stream of consciousness typing and things like that, for example. I was very interested in stuff that some trance channelers are involved in, people like Mary Ennis or Esther Hicks and those types of people. So as these two sides began combining in my life, this sort of dream consciousness side with all of this stuff that I had going on with energy, almost by accident, I started realizing that as I was tuning into energy, for example, during treatment sessions or even just tuning into my own energy and doing so from these sort of trance states, that it would start to naturally translate into a lot of information, essentially in the same way that you experience dreams, through languages of sound and imagery and these rich languages that are conveyed through dreams and even also through what you see in film and television, right? So I could see that this was ending up providing me information that was really valuable for me as a practitioner. It was guiding me in the way that I would treat patients, what points I would choose to use, what areas of the body may be being affected that weren't obvious right away. And as that continued, it began to give me information that was really, it was going beyond what was happening in the treatment session, right? It was really talking to me about the origins of disease, of a particular disease for a particular patient, where these things came from, aspects or issues in a person's life that had led to the creation of these illnesses and these struggles. So that was really the birth of linguistic energy medicine and how it ended up growing from my acupuncture practices and the practices that I was doing in this mindfulness consciousness area. Okay, this next question is, how can you treat my pain over the phone? And I think this is a great question because it really taps into what for me is like the elephant in the room in Western society with regard to energy medicine in general. There's a fair amount of skepticism about energy healing amid modern medicine, I should say. And a big reason for this has to do with the cultural differences that, as I was mentioning, how we are very physically based in America and in the West in general. And though we are aware of electromagnetic phenomenon of the body, in general, these more subtle qualities of energy, of a bioenergetic field, they're not areas that have been explored in detail. They're not something that is encouraged culturally for us to develop our own sensory ability to tap into, to perceive, whether visually or kinesthetically or auditorily or in some other ways. Because it is possible for you as a human being, I can guarantee you, that you can develop the skills to perceive energy. But because we don't, there ends up being skepticism about whether it exists, whether, even if it does exist, how it could help the body, how it could be used in healing. And in general, there's been kind of a stagnation in the use of research and science and technology, though this is changing some. But up until now, there hasn't been a lot of intense work in this area of being able to perceive and use energy from a technological modern medicine standpoint either. So overall, what ends up, this amounts to not really having a real framework to understand how energy affects the physical body. And I can tell you that, or I should admit to you, that I don't understand the real mechanisms either. I do have high hope that I get to, in my life, begin to learn about and discover some of these mechanisms and see them applied in a more scientific context, because I think technology can get to the point that it could really start taking advantage of some of the things that I've been able to begin to perceive in myself around energy. But for now, it's a matter of conjecture, right? There's a few philosophies or theories, I guess I should say, of how we can be treating someone at a distance with energy and affecting them. Sort of the first would be this idea that though our energy fields around the physical body, they are diminishing in intensity quite rapidly, they actually never diminished entirely to zero. So what that means is that, in fact, all of us are in truth continuously bathed in the electromagnetic energy of everyone else on the planet. And even if it's in minuscule amounts. So in theory, there is a potential sensitivity that we could be working at levels that are much more sensitive than what we experience technologically, what we can sense technologically in energy, but that in some way our organic forms are able to tap into that and use it. Another theory, which I ascribe to more, it makes more sense to me overall from the standpoint of my beliefs about consciousness, is that inherently we are all deeply interconnected in a subjective context, in a non-physical way. And that because of that, it's not necessary for us to tune into one another, in fact, through physical space and time, right? It's more about an internal tuning in that allows us to connect with any other human being on the planet. It's more a matter of that we've developed filtering mechanisms, so we're not, when all of consciousness is that interconnected, if you don't have filtering mechanisms, we would just be overwhelmed with information from all kinds of areas. And if you think of this moving even farther than just the dimension and experience that we're having with other human beings, it's just astronomical, the amount of information that's continuously available and flowing through us. So what this creates is a scenario in which it's not necessarily about reaching out, but tuning in, right? A specificity of tuning into specific channels and specific individuals, and even within a given individual, tuning into a specific condition or issue, and deriving information out of it that can help treat or understand. That this is the real basis of how the treatment can take place over the telephone. And as an example, a quick example that I can give you that I know pretty much everyone has experienced at some point in their life, so you understand what I'm talking about here. Probably most of you at some point or another have started thinking about maybe an old friend, someone you haven't talked to in a long time. You probably haven't even thought of them in a long time. But for some reason or another, they pop into your mind. You're pondering about them. You don't know why they popped into your mind, but they're there. And then maybe suddenly the phone rings and it's them on the phone, right? You haven't heard from them in a long time, and you had this sort of premonition, quick premonition of information about them before the call took place. This is an example of that information flowing into your consciousness, into your organic consciousness, independent of the technological means or sort of standard understood methods of communication. And the point of linguistic energy medicine is simply to move into a more formalized, repeatable understanding and application of that phenomenon. So we want to be able to use it in the context of learning about healing, about the body, about an illness, about how a person can more easily achieve what they want to achieve with their life. And we're tapping into those channels of information. It's great and very intriguing and interesting that sometimes you get random hits like that, and we don't really think twice about it. We're kind of curious, but then you move on. And part of the reason is just because we don't notice these things happening that much. They're more few and far between. Linguistic energy medicine, the whole point of it is to really hone oneself, hone a practitioner's ability to access and learn how to apply in positive ways that channel of communication and the information that we can attain out of it. Okay? All right, this next question is, do you have any success stories? And if so, can you tell us about them? I do have some success stories, but I want to preface that question by saying that in this official context, linguistic energy medicine has only been around for about a year now. So it definitely doesn't have a huge track record of successes, nor of failures for that matter. It just hasn't been around long enough to start generating a lot of information for us to kind of research. And additionally, because it's so focused for me in particular on expanding people's lifespans, that's an area that does require a long time to really get concrete, formal data to look at, to understand how successful it is and what it's capable of. So from that longevity standpoint, I would say that it is moving in alignment and in resonance with a lot of existing research about longevity. And this information comes out of some research that's primarily associated with looking at cultures, various spots throughout the planet in which, for some reason or another, there's much lower incidences of disease, and there is longer lifespans in general by quite a bit. And these areas, they've kind of discovered that there's not a simple, quick magic bullet or magic pill that can create these longer, healthier lifespans. It's not even so much associated with diet. There's some dietary stuff that we've seen, like there is a tendency to have whole foods based diets, but there's a wide variety of diets that have in these cultures that have increased longevities. There's not exercise in the same way that we think of in the West, where there's a big push associating health with exercise here. We don't see that so much at least not exercise in the way that we think of in the West, in these areas that have this longevity. And the things that it does seem to be focused on are things that are really connected with what I've been talking about with linguistic energy medicine. They're these ideas of connection, resonance, valuing the world, valuing your life, being valued in your culture by others around you, regardless of your age, recognizing your reason for being, knowing why it is that you wake up in the morning. All of these sort of base level cultural phenomena that happen in these small pockets are tied very closely with things that linguistic energy medicine is designed to provide. So I'm just throwing that out there because I want to be upfront and honest with you that this hasn't been around long enough to be shown scientifically that it can produce these longer lifespans. I'm basing it on existing research and what I know linguistic energy medicine is designed to do. Now, in terms of success stories that I think I've been able to witness in a more shorter term, the ones that have really struck me have to do with chronic conditions that people have dealt with. Though, if you have an acute condition, whether that's like a seasonal cold or, perhaps like a sprained ankle or something like that, though there is positive benefits that can occur from single sessions or, a number of sessions in terms of just elevating your vibration, as I was talking about. It's these chronic conditions that I found really fascinating. And the reason is because it wasn't just about fixing the condition or fixing in general. It's not about giving someone a pill and today they're sick and tomorrow everything's healthy, but nothing else has changed in their life. When you heal yourself of a chronic condition with linguistic energy medicine, it involves a process of development and growth that it's, for me, really a joy to witness, because when someone has a chronic illness, there's always, with few exceptions, some major underlying block, not only to their health, their ability to create health, but to one's ability to expand and grow in life into who they really are, into expressing things that are genuinely important to them, that are tied in with that ikigai, right? If your ikigai is getting blocked or there's a lot of friction, this is very possible that an individual manifests some sort of an illness around that. So it's not something that happens overnight when people cure themselves of these chronic conditions. It's a process for them. It involves them addressing another overarching issue that is a challenge for them. A couple examples that I can give you. I had a woman recently who's had incredible success curing herself of migraine headaches. And she started getting these headaches around the age of, I think she said 8 or 10 years old or so. And she wasn't getting them at an incredibly ongoing basis early on in her life. But by the time she started seeing me, she was at the point where she was getting them multiple times a week in some cases. And if you know anyone with migraines, they can put you down for a couple days where you can't get out of bed. So you can imagine if you're getting several a week, this is a problem. It's really hampering your ability to engage life. And as it turned out, as we started reading into it and trying to discover what was going on with this condition, that there was a lot happening with her around her career and around her work and around, in particular, interactions with people in her work, both her coworkers and management. And she had a lot of issues around almost perceiving like a big brother mentality from management. And this was really blocking her ability to be herself, to express herself naturally and be who she really was, because she thought that she continuously had to conform herself into something to impress them or to abide their demands and what they thought was appropriate for an employee. not that this was all necessarily true. Some of it may have been. A lot of it was just tied up in her perception. But within that perception, that was generating a lot of blocks in her, a lot of holding, a lot of tension in her energy field and in her physical body. And it started manifesting in these horrible headaches. So as we stopped really trying to fix the headache per se and started addressing the issue of altering her perception around career, around interaction with people, around how she was free or not to engage herself, to express herself, she started really making a lot of headway. And she still suffers a headache now and again, but they're very short, relatively speaking, much less severe. And so it's been incredible for her. Another person that was inspiring to me was able to cure himself relatively quickly too from an inflammatory condition in his bowels. And some of these conditions, if they get out of control, they can be very dangerous. These things like ulcerative colitis, for example, can be that you can end up losing a lot of blood, and they can actually be lethal in some cases. So it turned out with this individual, his condition was wrapped around fear. He had a lot of almost a hypochondria, fear about health, and it was tied a lot with food, with not so much the toxicity of food, but really just that food in general, any sort of ingestion process for him he was wrapping around this idea that it was going to be harmful to him in some way. It wasn't necessarily a rational thing, but nevertheless, it doesn't have to be rational to start to affect your energy. And when your energy gets affected, your body eventually follows suit. So as we, with this patient, stopped addressing, again, same thing, stop trying to fix the problem with the physical body and start addressing what's being communicated by that signal of the physical body. Address the fear, this hypochondria, this anxiety that would occur every time he put food in his mouth. And sometimes I would add too that an interesting thing is he wasn't necessarily paying attention to this fear. He would still just eat normally and basically ignore the fear, but the manifestation became impossible to ignore, right? So as he began to turn his attention to address the fear itself, he very quickly not only dissipated through the fear, but cured himself of the illness. So that was pretty cool. And one more patient too that I would throw in there as a success that I found inspiring was a woman who was suffering from chronic physical pain, all in her lower body, in her hip and sciatic pain. And the interesting thing about this case was that even though the pain and the illness per se was all manifesting in her lower body, as it turned out, the real issue for her was taking place much more in her upper body, in her throat, and her ability to express herself verbally in social contexts. And this is something that she had always struggled with throughout her life. And she had essentially compensated for this deficiency of self-expression socially and verbally with a self-expression through dance and physical movement, which was fine for a long time. It allowed her that outlet. But eventually, the block in the upper part of her body started translating into a block in her lower body. And this prevented her from dancing because the more she moved, the more the pain would worsen. So it started to really inhibit her ability to really move, not only just in the sake of dance, but anytime she was involving herself in too much physical movement, the pain would become really bad for her. So again, similar situation, as she began to address these social anxieties and find ways that she could practice and develop an ability to communicate verbally and feel comfortable there, it would began unwinding the block in her lower body as well. And I will add that in all of these cases, it's usually something very challenging for a person. When you manifest a condition that's chronic like this, it's because the issue itself is particularly challenging for a person. Now, it doesn't mean it's challenging for everyone, right? I mean, there's lots of people who aren't suffering from social anxiety and they can talk your ear off and have no problem with that. But for this particular patient, it was something very difficult for her. And so there was this developmental growth process. And this is the thing that it isn't so inspiring for me, is when you see a person heal of a condition like this, you see them also expand into something that is much more of who they really want to be, who they are. And there's also an overarching understanding within that patient, even though they may engage linguistic energy medicine to help support them, to aid them, to help them decipher what's being communicated to them, at the end of the day, they are the ones that do the true healing. There's a knowing within them when they healed it that it was them who healed it. And so this is it's, I think, an empowering expression of knowing that health is yours, that occurs in these healing processes with linguistic energy medicine. So those are a few of the big successes, I would say. All right, this next question. When I'm in pain, I don't have any energy. I just want to lie around. Are you suggesting that I get up and act energetic? Won't that make the pain worse? I'm not suggesting that you get up and act energetic when you're in pain. Definitely not. In general, I would say that pain is what I refer to as a red light signal. And I call it that because, similar to approaching a red light in traffic, the communication is not for you to act energetic. It's not for you to charge out into the middle of the intersection. It's a communication to stop, to interpret what's going on, wait for a green light signal before you take your next move. And in general, pain can be thought of in the same way, as well as a number of other signals as well, emotional signals. Most signals that have what we think of as like a negative context can be thought of in general as a red light signal. And in the case of pain, you can also consider that it's very possible, generally pain is some perception on your part that you are experiencing a dangerous situation. So this is even more so an indication that it's not appropriate for you to necessarily charge into action. It's possible that there is a real danger. It may just be some danger that you're perceiving that's not rational and not really truly dangerous and threatening. Nevertheless, as far as your mind and your body is concerned, there's something dangerous happening. So in this case, the suggestion would be to stop and interpret, to move your attention from the pain itself to try to start addressing that communication underneath. As you begin to address these communications underneath the signal, then that's when you're much more likely to gain understanding of what you're communicating to yourself through this manifestation of the pain, and you're much more likely to start generating green light signals for yourself, whether those are inspirations, motivations, direct indications of a manner in which you can proceed and heal most effectively. I will say, just as a fine point here, there are certain cases where pain would communicate to you that you need to act quickly, right? The obvious one is you put your hand on a hot stove. The sooner you act, the better. There are cases that are less, because that's a reflex action, right? It's not something that you're going to think about a lot. It's just going to happen. But if you think of a condition like someone undergoing a lot of depression and anxiety, which I interpret as a form of emotional pain, these conditions, you hear so often when a person's depressed that they can't get out of bed. They stay in bed for days on end. They're not acting energetic in any way. And it is possible that you will not be able to address that pain. That pain will probably not get better. And there's a potential maybe it will even get worse a little bit until you take some sort of action. But there again, there's particular actions that are likely much better for you to take place than to just arbitrarily act energetic. From the standpoint of this question, and part of the reason that I think it was asked, is just this idea of not totally understanding what energy means in our culture from the standpoint that I'm talking about energy now. There's many different ways that energy can be expressed. It can be expressed through physical movement, through action. It can also be expressed through your presence alone. It can be expressed through productions. It can be expressed through communication. Linguistic energy medicine is engaging that avenue of energy expression a lot, the communication avenue. And so being involved in a linguistic energy medicine session, it is going to be an energetic exchange, and it will feel, in a manner of speaking, energetic, but that's not to say it's going to involve a lot of movement or strain on your physical body or your psycho-emotional well-being. In fact, it's usually experienced in a very calming, relaxing, rejuvenating way. And so, yeah, I hope that answers that question. All right. This last question, this relatively general question, is why are you right? Why energy medicine? Why linguistic energy medicine? And why you in particular? And before I answer this, some of these questions, the why are you right? They are sort of implying that there is some underlying absolute right and wrong. And I don't think that that's truly accurate. The perception of right and wrong are very individualized. They're unique to a particular person and associated with particular beliefs that a person has. So what is right for me won't necessarily be right for someone else. And based on that, I can tell you that there are most definitely individuals out there who energy medicine will not be right for them. Linguistic energy medicine will not be right for them. And maybe even if energy medicine is right for them, being treated by me and interacting with me in an energy context won't be right for you. I can tell you that energy medicine and linguistic energy medicine, they have really been right for me. I have resonated with them and followed this path for a long time now. And I can share with you a couple of the reasons that has been the case. And to the extent that you feel like you harmonize and resonate with those reasons, then I would say that is why it would be right for you, because you naturally feel that it's appropriate for you, that you feel a resonance with these ideas. And I would add that there's nothing wrong. There's no better and worse here of a person who wants to manifest their healing through, taking pharmaceutical medications and, abiding by a certain diet or a certain exercise regimen. There's nothing wrong with that. And treating yourself with energy instead, or moving into this paradigm of energy healing versus physical healing, it's totally a matter of preference and interest. It's not a hierarchy here at all. The reasons that it has been right for me, I kind of divide it into three groups. The first one is that energy medicine in general is very non-invasive. And I kind of appreciate that. I'm drawn to this idea that comes from naturopathic medicine, for one, of first do no harm. And I think a lot of modern medicine, unfortunately, it ends up potentially being quite harmful to a person beyond, in some cases, what the illness itself does, right? There can be a lot of side effects to a lot of medications or surgeries. And when it comes to energy medicine, the recovery times, there is no recovery times. If anything, sometimes a person feels like taking a nap after a session, a rejuvenating nap. That's about the extent of recovery time. And as far as I know, there's no negative side effects that I've experienced thus far. I have seen some positive side effects occur, and those, by that I mean that a person sometimes has come in to be treated by me for a certain condition, and we work with that, and that ends up having positive healing effects for some other condition that the person was experiencing that they never even told me about. So to me, that's awesome, and I consider that kind of a side effect excellent. And kind of in this area too, I can say that I've seen some people who had these chronic conditions, as I mentioned, that they've had for a long time. They've tried many different avenues to address them and heal them, and none of them had made significant headway with treating the condition and helping them heal. And they were able to, because of really this different framework of linguistic energy medicine, make some real progress of unlocking, dissolving blocks and healing conditions that otherwise had been stuck for a long time. And to me, that almost in and of itself is part of why energy medicine is right for me. This second area that I believe is great about energy medicine and linguistic energy medicine has to do with freedom, with being liberated from a certain medical system or a certain set of drugs or a certain doctor for providing you your health. Your energy field is something you're born with. No one can ever take it from you. And in truth, no one can actually even manipulate it except you. Now, it is possible for you to engage with an energy practitioner. And within that, your energy field may be affected and manipulated because you're moving in conjunction with them. You are engaging the process in a way that is consenting of that action to take place. And within that, it may seem like the practitioner is healing or affecting you, but really at a base level, your energy field responds only to one guidance, and that comes from your subjective awareness. And when you get to the point where you are capable of maintaining your energy field in such a way that it holds you in a state of health, it's an incredibly empowering and liberating feeling that you're not a puppet on a string to anyone. You're not riding out some fate of a body that you have no control of. It really puts you in the driver's seat of your own health, and I love that about it. And this last reason, which is sort of related to this, just has to do with the paradigm or perception that we have of the human body itself, what the human body is. Most modern medicine, it interprets the physical body as essentially a machine, a complicated machine, but nonetheless a machine, not so different from a car or perhaps a computer of some sort. And not that there's anything wrong with that frame of reference, but inherently what it creates is being subject to a type of entropy. Every machine that we've created throughout time, we create it, and from that moment forward, it is essentially degrading in some way. It is slowly breaking down and wearing out. And generally speaking, we consider the body to be that same way. Now, linguistic energy medicine interprets the body from a very different paradigm. It actually interprets the body as a projection of your consciousness in this physical reality. And within that, it allows the body to act in a much more dynamic way, in a much more fluid way, that it's continuously reconfiguring itself in conjunction with your overarching conscious state, who you are, and what is appropriate for you in that particular time of your life. So this changes the whole perception of what disease is, and it shifts it away from being some sort of a malfunction of your body or something that's coming at you from the outside or sort of being imposed upon you, and thinks of it in terms of something that is more being expressed outward from within you out into the world. And from this standpoint, rather than disease being thought of as a malfunction per se, it almost makes more sense to think of it as a capability of the body. It is part of a wide spectrum of this palette that your body has the ability to shape itself into to help communicate to you information about who you really are, where you really are with respect to that, what things are really important to you, where you're getting blocked, and so forth. And it manifests a situation in which, because of the way linguistic energy medicine works, the body turns into something that we are focusing very much on to into the body and into the energy field to derive this information to help our conscious awareness expand and our perceptions change. And simultaneously, it becomes the recipient of that change because as your conscious awareness changes, the body automatically begins to reconfigure itself to align with that. So I find that to be this really interesting synchronicity between, or interconnection, I guess I should say, of what the body is, both simultaneously the deliverer of information and the beneficiary of the changes that can take place. And it creates a state where there's just much more potential and openness for possibilities of what you can become, what you can accomplish, how long you can live, how healthy you can be, and really just how your body can form. And I think that we're at a state in history in which we're on the verge of discovering that our bodies are capable of far more than we ever realized. So these are sort of the reasons that energy medicine has really drawn me, and I've gone down this path. And I hope that they're as inspiring to you as they are to me. That's all the questions that I have right now. So right below this video, you can schedule, or on my website, if you're seeing this on someplace that's not my website, studioclinicportland.com, you can schedule linguistic energy medicine sessions. You can just do it all entirely online. I would also say that I would love to hear from you for any sort of correspondence. If you have questions or any suggestions that you have maybe for topics for me to address in other videos, that I can share more information about these topics of energy and healing and language. And I will also add that there is certain conditions that I'm willing to treat from a pro bono standpoint, free of charge. It would be based just more on me doing research and testing into areas where, because it's such a young modality, where linguistic energy medicine is really flourishing and is really effective. And I also want to discover places that it might not be that effective. So in exchange for some sort of testimonials and just the information of the experience you end up having with linguistic energy medicine, it may be possible for me to treat you on a pro bono standpoint. Just send me an email. My email address, ajdonich at studioclinicportland.com. Just get in touch with me and tell me what your situation is and what you're hoping to accomplish, and we can arrange to see if that's possible. If you are wanting to try just a single session, but think that it's a little too much of an investment for you on a one-time standpoint, I'd be willing to, for a first session basis, to give you a good discount. Again, just send me an email and ask me, and we can chat about what could work for you. Just because I want to give as many people as I can the opportunity to at least experience this, even if it doesn't become something that you use to treat yourself on a long-term basis. I want to share it with as many people as I can. And you can also sign up for a little energy healing guide that I called the 5 Steps to Healing Yourself with Energy, that can help you start to train yourself in some of these areas of becoming more sensory perceptive of energy, of sort of starting to see how your energy is affecting things, and moving you through some steps to start really perceiving energy as a linguistic expression. So just by signing up for my monthly newsletter, you can have access to that. It will come to you in the introductory email. And I think that's all I have. I hope this has been informative, and I hope to hear from you soon. And I hope you have a great day. Thank you.